I kind of liked the way that I did it. Like I liked to see my body go the limit that it could go, and then be okay with the fact that I decided that getting the epidural at that point was okay. And that's kind of what I've followed with each subsequent birth.
You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, where you'll gain the knowledge and confidence you need to erase the unknowns of pregnancy and birth and rock the newborn days like a boss. My name is Liesl Teen. I'm a fellow mom, labor and delivery nurse, and your host. Each week on this podcast, you'll hear a mix of birth stories, expert interviews, and other fun pregnancy and birth-related content. As a reminder, anything you hear on this podcast is not medical advice. Please see mommylabornurse.com/disclaimer for more details. And now let's get into this week's episode. Hey guys, happy Monday. So this week on the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, I had Brooke from the Southernish Mama come on the show to talk all about her pregnancies and births. Brooke has a popular Instagram page where she does a lot of fun and relatable content surrounding pregnancy, motherhood, and other lifestyle topics with the use of her letterboard. At the beginning of the episode, you'll hear Brooke and I chat about the realities of being a work-at-home Instagram mom and trials and tribulations of the algorithm and what it's really like to work with a letterboard. But the heart of the episode surrounds Brooke's pregnancies and birth stories, which were each a little bit different, but certainly had a lot of similarities too. Brooke opens up about some of struggles with mental health and the way that she felt panicked and disconnected from her birth team during her third birth, which isn't something I want for any mama during her labor. Chatting with Brooke was like connecting with an old friend, even though we've never actually spoken outside of Instagram before. Her positive energy radiates through the conversation, and you'll hear her ask me just as many questions as I asked her. At the time of recording this episode, Brooke was pregnant with her fourth baby, but she since has given birth to a beautiful baby boy. She had a number 4. We can't wait to have her back on the show to share that story too. But without further ado, let's get into Brooke's first 3 birth stories. Hi, Brooke. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much for coming on today. See, I've said that like dozens of times, and I knew I would mess it up one time. So
thank you for having me, which I'm so happy. But basically, I reached out to you, so it's kind of like, works
maybe
both
that's
ways.
why I got confused, right?
Totally. You're like, wait a second, who's having who?
Love it. Well, Brooke, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a fellow social media lady too, as I am. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Where are you from?
Sure.
What you do,
yeah.
all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So I run an Instagram account called the Southernish Mama, which I started when I was pregnant with my second son, Vance. And I've kind of just grown it over time. It's kind of morphed. It started with, again, just talking about pregnancy because my first pregnancy was just such a unique time and you can't help but share about it. And at the time I kind of just like journaled on my computer. And so I was like, I might as well just start sharing. And it wasn't anything special. It was more just relatability to other moms and kind of sharing just what I was going through.
Yeah.
And then I kind of took it up a notch. And we were just talking about Maya. And I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Yes.
Yes.
It's German. She told me
German.
She's not German at all, but her husband is fully German.
Got it.
That's where she got her name. I know.
Okay.
It's hard to pronounce.
I'm like, I know where she's from. She's got a little bit of that cute accent. So she was kind of like the OG letterboard mom. And I remember I had followed her a while back and then it kind of started like popping up. And she would do kind of these hilarious takes on letterboards with her husband. And they were just so funny and so original. And then I think as I kind of developed my social media and I was pregnant, the letterboard did become, I had one at my house. I was like, well, a lot more people had started doing it. And I thought it would just be such a fun way to track my pregnancy with that visual aid. And so I kind of started adding the letterboard into my Instagram feed. And it just is that, again, that visual prop that helps people see really what's, what you're trying to say through the image. And not only that, it helps, which I'm sure now with your Instagram, any sort of text or information, it keeps the viewers on your image longer. So now I know a little bit the algorithmic benefit of using it.
We're always
and
trying
at the
to
time,
bust the algorithm. I mean,
always
trying.
And now it's changing, and the letterboards. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I've got to do reels. I've got to do reels, and I've got to be funny, and I've got to be a comedian. So it certainly has changed. At the time, the letterboard had worked, and I think people just kind of jumped on and following my pregnancy journey. And I think I went from like 15,000 followers pretty much all the way up to like 100,000 followers. And I kind of morphed, from sharing about pregnancy to then just sharing after my son was born. And this was actually my third son because I have 3 boys now. Really just like mom encouragement and like any sort of quote or just something funny, kind of like, you're a little bit of a different genre, but you can be serious, you can be funny, just anything that'll touch your audience in some way. So that's kind of what I do now, but I am pregnant with my now 4th baby. So anyway, I run this social media platform and I'm a stay-at-home mom simultaneously. But I guess I do somewhat work, part-time, I guess, throughout the day when I can weave it in during naps and all of that. I'm just now, I guess, 8 months pregnant with our 4th, and we aren't finding out the gender. And so just combining that all, I feel like my life is kind of one big everything kind of overlaps, which is actually everything I'd ever hoped for, that I could kind of work and be with my kids and share with other women and try to hold it all together at the same time. But
I mean, as we all are, right? I mean,
yes,
like we all are trying to hold it together. No, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. No, I explain. So that's kind of how I feel like I'm more a work from, I don't really know what my label is anymore. Like
totally.
I'm not really a stay-at-home mom because like I'm up here in my office talking to you, like I'm working, and I'm not really a total work at home mom because like my kids are here sometimes and I do work during nap times, and it's just, I'm just like,
totally,
I guess.
I kind of like it though. Cause I like that we as moms now have so much flexibility to kind of like create our own definition of what it means to satisfy ourselves through, work, be with our kids in whatever capacity we can, and kind of like blend it all together. And, it works.
It does. So I have a question for you. Do you have a favorite letterboard quote that you've done?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I've done like so many, to the point where I'm like, some days I'm like, if I have to hold this letterboard, I am going to have a problem. So I did one today. I just had a friend here with her kids, and she's one of my best friends. We've been pregnant 3 out of my 4 pregnancies and 3 out of 3 of her pregnancies.
Oh, nice.
So I love doing like the group, just when I can bring a friend in and share a photo. I don't know. It just kind of is another connection where maybe my followers can see that I've got, like a social life outside.
Just me. I have friends, guys.
Yes, I promise. I'm normal, and here's my friend, and she's pregnant too. And it's cute. So that was fun. I like shooting those. But quotes, oh gosh, I don't even know. There are so many. There are certain categories, I guess, that I like talking about, and probably same for you, that know that you enjoy talking about them and your followers actually very much enjoy them. I've been able to breastfeed my baby, so talking about kind of like normalizing what that means. Like, I know my experience, but maybe, a quote about breastfeeding, or just a quote about, again, like motherhood and friendship, or a quote that motherhood is hard. And just that relatability that I can throw out there into the internet and kind of get the feedback. So I love talking about topics that my followers like. that my followers get a lot out of. So I guess it's a range of all different sorts of topics. So
love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So what I do when I have a letter board up there, I used to I have all the letters. Okay. So I used to literally put them on every single time.
All. Yeah.
And now I found a program where I can just edit it afterwards. So I just literally hold up a blank one.
Yep.
So what do you do?
Yeah. So I kind of prided myself on the fact that I used to build every single one, and I would think it through, and I actually still have multiple letter boards, and I would build them out.
Yeah.
And then I would kind of bust out the photos even on one day and switch my outfit. Cause then I'm I don't want to do this every single day.
Right.
But then I was like, why am I using my little fingers?
It takes so much time.
It takes so much time, and aesthetically, I think it looks nice because you can slightly, ever so slightly tell that the font now, I Photoshop the font onto the letterboard and just hope and pray that my followers don't care. And I think that at the end of the day, we're both busy people, we're busy moms. So it's whatever hacks that you can try to keep the integrity of what you're trying to hit at, which for us is information, or opinion or whatever. And if we can do that, save ourselves some time. For me, I have my kids in the photos a lot, and I want to play with them during the day and get other stuff done. So it's I can't sit there for 30 minutes and build out a letterboard anymore.
Same girl, same.
I
stopped doing it after I don't know how long I was doing it, just myself, but I actually got one of those, I don't even know what it's really for, pills or something, but it's a giant pill organizer. And I had them all
me too.
Because that is
the ABCD. Yes.
Because that was the biggest PETA is all the letters were mixed up. And I originally had them in this bag, and then
you have to find them. Yes.
Yeah.
Or
it
you're
was
missing,
just
you don't have enough T's, and you're
yes.
Well, now I have to do a whole new quote because I ran out of T's. And no, trust me, I think the headache that came with it, I was just you know what? At one point, yes, I did pride myself on that, but now it's just so much faster, and you can be more flexible with what you want to say. So it's whereas we were building them before, you had to really commit to what you were going to do or say that's on that board. And what I found with me is sometimes when I'm writing, I get in the zone. And I'm I don't want to talk about that anymore. Or something just hits me, and I'm I want to talk about this today because that's what's on my heart and my mind. So I think it works so much better. It's a time saver. You get to hit the point that you really want to talk about that day versus being forced to use something because you're well, I spent 30 minutes building this sucker, so we're sticking with it.
That's right. I totally agree. And I know my little one, no, I guess not my little one. My older one used to be my little one. My older one was, 2-ish, 3 years old. And sometimes he would be getting onto it and and I'm no, the kids are, that's a whole other headache for
totally. Or
touching.
Have you ever knocked it down on accident?
Yep. Oh yes.
And the letters fall off and you're no, I just built this stinking thing and the letters just fell. So I think it was just, I got to the point of too many, whatever you call them, red flags. And I was okay, let's just
time to
type it out. Totally. Totally.
Cool.
So, and it's interesting because, well, I'm sure, like you were saying, keeping up with the algorithm, it's such a different beast. And I think now I'm at the point where it's okay, I need to do something. The letter boards worked, and they still do work, but the way that the algorithm changes, you really have to kind of you have to stay up to date with it, or you're just, they reward things that they want to be pushed out more. Mm-hmm. And because whether people like to see them more, whether people are just keeping their eyes on it longer. And now Reels is such a big thing that it's kind of forced me to face some new
The
challenges where,
inevitable. You got to get
oh,
out the reels.
yes.
I know. I remember when
Oh
I
my
started,
gosh.
I had a conversation with another creator who had just started doing reels, and I had the same hesitation of like, oh, I don't, it seems like it takes so much time, blah, blah, blah. She's like, it
Yeah.
does, but I mean, it's kind of at the end of the day worth it. Like if that's what they're looking
Yes.
for. I wonder if you could do
Yes.
something with letterboards and reels and
The board, you're
something.
so
Yeah.
right.
I
Yes,
don't
where I
know.
can kind of stay in my lane, but then like
Yeah.
act it out a little
Yeah.
bit. Or absolutely. It's been on my mind where I'm like, okay, if this is like my
Yeah.
avenue, I've got to figure out how to stay like relevant and all that crazy stuff.
I'm sure you'll do it. I'm sure you'll do it.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll figure it out.
Yes. All right, Brooke. Well, let's talk about, since, you started your blog, social media when you were pregnant, I want to talk about your previous pregnancies and your births, and then maybe some plans that you have with this fourth baby's birth. So can you kind of go back? I want to talk about your first one, like before you even started social media. Can you kind of go back? And if you don't mind sharing how,
Absolutely.
when you got pregnant with your first one and if you had any issues with loss or miscarriage or anything getting pregnant, and then we can talk about that pregnancy and those births, and then we can kind of get into your next two.
Absolutely. So starting with my oldest, and again, I have 3 boys, pregnant with my 4th. So starting with my first, his name is Rhett. And my husband and I had just gotten married, and I had worked so hard to get into Georgetown Business School. I got in. We planned to get married before I started my program so that I wouldn't have to think about a wedding or wedding planning or anything like that. We flew home on a red eye from Kauai on our honeymoon, which was so nice. I started opening term of business school, and Ryan got to work. He had just started this amazing job. He's a lawyer in DC, got this amazing job opportunity. And so we were so busy. And a few weeks into starting business school, I wasn't feeling good. And I was so tired. It was my birthday. And usually I'm like, let's go, I don't know, get a margarita, or let's go do something fun. And I was just sitting on the couch being like, I'm so tired. I don't even want to get up. And we had just gotten married, right? And so we'd only I think we dated and were engaged for a year and a half total. And I think he looked at me like, oh my gosh, did I marry this girl? And now she's different. Cause I was so just exhausted and not feeling well. And so he's like, we probably should get you to a doctor. And I was like, well, let me take a pregnancy test because, but we were so busy that at that point I was like, I don't know how that could be possible, but let's rule it off. And sure enough, we had just bought a tiny 1-bedroom, 600 square foot condo. I took the pregnancy test in that bathroom, and positive.
Yeah.
I came out and I just sat down and I was like, what? And I've always wanted to be a mom, but I think the timing of it all, I was just like, I've worked so hard to get into school, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. So anyway, but then the anxiety turned into excitement, and I committed to finishing my program, which was a 2-year program. Luckily, Rhett, our son, who we didn't know the gender, boy or girl, was supposed to be born right in summer of my first and second year. So then I'd have to just finish the second year of school as a mom. Yeah. So it actually worked out, timing wise, it worked out pretty dang well. And with school, I think after I had him, I had a babysitter come, and I had someone come 20 hours a week.
Okay.
So that pregnancy though, I think when you're pregnant the first time, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me personally, it was just something I had anticipated for so much of my life, that it was this, it's almost kind of I equate it to how I felt when I was getting married, where you feel you're I've been waiting for this my entire life. So everything is elevated, right? Everything is hyped up to the maximum, or at least it was for me. And people are like, what would you have done differently? And I'm I feel I was kind of a little bit of a diva because when you're going through it, I'm like, for good reason, a little bit, because you're doing this amazing, beautiful, wonderful thing. But in the same sense, I think I was, now that I guess what I'm trying to say is now that this is my fourth pregnancy, it's kind of like par for the course a little bit. But that first time,
as it probably would be.
Yeah.
Fourth time
and I even things like working out, like I've worked out pretty much my exercise my entire life. I didn't really exercise because even just it felt weird, or I just didn't want to hurt the baby, or like, God forbid, something went wrong. And then eating, I was like, well, I have to eat enough, because then you're worried about the baby. It was just constant anxiety, I think, just like, I want to make sure the baby's safe. Like, what if this affects the baby? So I ended up gaining, I think I stopped looking at the scale after I had gained, I think 60 pounds. And I still at that point had like a month and a half to go. Mm-hmm. So I gained a ton of weight. But he was born at 40 weeks. My water broke at 40 weeks, right on his due date. So he was born the day after his due date, which is great.
Yeah.
And I delivered him, I guess, well, you would know better than I do, but the nurses were like, your labor was kind of like a textbook labor, if we could describe it that way. It was like, my water broke at midnight. I started contracting right away. I dilated 1 centimeter every hour, and my labor was 10 hours. So he was born at like 10 a.m.
Oh, wow.
They did have me labor down for quite a bit of time. So, and I'm curious about that, because I had a situation with my third where they had me labor down. And I was just talking to my girlfriend about it, where I was like, I don't understand the labor down thing. Like, because I always go into, and I don't want this to sound bad, I always like go into labor at midnight. So I always get like the night, I'm like, do the doctors just want to like sleep? And then they'd have me like sit there. I don't know, and we'll get into this. I'm group B strep too. So I'm like, I know that with my first and third, I was like, do they want me to like, I don't know if that has anything to do. I know I don't want to start rumors. You will stand here to correct me, I'm sure, but
you're good.
This isn't, I know that I'm capable of having babies, but I don't know, the nuances and the science behind it. So I always have my questions, since I've gone through it now almost like 4 times.
There's always stuff to learn too. I mean, even the 4th time around. Yeah. So with laboring down, usually what I tell people, it sounded like it was appropriate in your first one. It's not always just for like a convenience kind of reason, but I think maybe some providers do it for that reason, but it's more actually a reason, because so if you get to where you're 10 centimeters dilated and your baby's still a little bit high in your pelvis, and you have an epidural and you're nice and comfortable with your epidural, you're not feeling like the urge to push, your contractions, your uterus they'll just have you kind of sit at 10 centimeters and not push, because your contractions will just kind of naturally push down baby. And then it usually can help you decrease your pushing time and decrease fatigue. So that brings me to my next question of like, how long did you push with your first one?
So with my first, I think I pushed for like, I don't know, maybe like 20 minutes or so.
Perfect. Then they labored down the perfect amount of time, and that sounds
and we'll get to the third birth story soon, and I'm curious to hear your take on that, because that one was where I had a lot more questions. Like the first time around, when you go into these situations, or at least when I did, you kind of just take everything at face value, right? But then once you've done it a few times, especially when you have repeat experiences, it often raises questions like, well, why did they do it that way? Or like, why didn't I maybe ask for more, or ask a few more questions? So that was Rhett. So he was my first. So I'd say that was generally, I guess, I don't even know if you could define like a standard labor. I got an epidural. I tried to go, and I know you've birthed without them, which man, I tried. Let me tell you, I tried. And I was sitting there like convulsing on the hospital bed.
It's hard.
And at that point, I think I was like 5 centimeters.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I can't go like 5 more. If I was going to dilate 1 centimeter, I was like, I can't go 5 more hours. And so I just not caved. Either way is great. Right. But for me, it was just it was perfect to get it the time that I did. Cause I went as far as I could feeling the contractions. And the first time going through it, that's what I wanted. I was like, I'll give it my best shot. I didn't do any sort. And I know that you have a lot of my followers ask if for resources, especially with COVID right now and not being able to access birthing plans. Yeah. And so I had mentioned you on the story, and I know you have like just a variety of, because some women decide I do want an epidural, I already know. Some women decide I want to do unmedicated, I guess from that point, I kind of liked the way that I did it. Like I liked to see my body go the limit that it could go, and then be okay with the fact that I decided that getting the epidural at that point was okay. And that's kind of what I've followed with each subsequent birth is like, go until you can go. If you, when you get to that point, then, get the epidural. And for me, that's birthed 3 beautiful, healthy babies. And so I'm sticking with it.
Right. Love it. So with your second one, you're saying it was a similar
So Vance was actually slightly different. Okay. So I had to be induced with him at 41 weeks.
Okay.
And he's the only baby I had to be induced with. So 41, I was waiting, and that was kind of, once again, like pregnancy can be so similar, but I had never gone over my due date. So that at that point I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You read, it's so hard when you're in that position because you read all this stuff and you're like, what do I do? Like, do I wait? Because there's like different schools of thought. So at that point, my doctor had mentioned that I could get induced as early as 39 weeks, just based off of, what, I don't know, but I was kind of in the camp that, well, I had my other son at 40, my water broke. So let's just kind of ride it out. Yeah. Which I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I know the 39-week thing, and it totally depends on the doctor too. Like some doctors and that's what makes it hard for moms, right? Where you're like, well, some doctors like theorize that this is okay. And then others are, like I have a friend and her doctor wasn't too keen on going at the 39-week mark. So it kind of puts you as a mom in like a position where you're like, well, and then you hear the stories of people like losing, God forbid, their kids because they go too long, so it's like at the end of the day, moms just want to do the best thing. And sometimes there's like so much gray in determining what that answer is. Right. Yeah. And you there is. And even anyway, so it's just hard, and you want to be your own advocate, but at the same time, you want to listen to your OB. And so with Vance, she didn't want me to go past 41. And at that point I was like ready to go. And so I had to be induced. Sorry. I'm like at that stage where I lose my breath so easily, especially when I'm talking.
I've been there.
For long period. I'm like, I feel like I'm running a marathon.
I get it.
So 41 weeks. And I was like going back and forth, like, should I get induced today? Should I do it tomorrow? So we waited to 41. I went in, and this is another topic, Pitocin. You hear the back and forth all the time, and I don't want to stand here on this podcast, like acting like I know, because I'm just a mom. It's like, I kind of hear things and then I research things and then I kind of just take my doctor's word for it / so originally I had heard, I had friends that were like, Pitocin is, da da da. And I was like, well, I'm kind of worried now. So going in, I was going to ask for alternatives to that, if there were alternatives. but I forgot. And so the nurse, and she was the sweetest woman ever. And the nurses make all the difference in the world. They do.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
they really do. They kind of make or break the whole thing. And she started the Pitocin. I forgot to tell her, and it ended up being fine. Like the contractions didn't start. She kind of upped it a little bit. And then they finally picked up, I think after like 45 minutes to an hour, she like upped it. And then his birth was fast. It was like 3 or 4 hours. They manually broke my water. I delivered him. I should add that with Rhett, my first, I tore like almost all the way. With Vance, he was 9 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I think she gave me like 1 stitch just for the heck of it. But she's like, nope, like it's so much like, but she saw the scar and she was like, oh my gosh, that was a big tear. And I'm like, yep.
All right, the sound of that baby crying means it's time for this week's segment of Birth It Up Babies. So this one is a quick one. I got this DM the other day from a girl that follows me, and she says, "Hi, Liesl. After a horrific birth experience for my first baby, I took your Birth It Up Natural Series course back in July in hopes for a natural birth with my second. I gave birth exactly 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to say it was the best experience ever. Yay! I still can't believe I gave birth without any interventions or an epidural. And I'd like to say it was because your course gave me the confidence, and while pushing, I kept thinking to myself, Liesl did it and so can I. So thank you." Aw, that is so sweet. I'm so glad that she could have such a redemptive experience after having, like she said, a horrific birth experience the first time. So if you want to check out the course that she took Birth It Up, the Natural Series, and you can head over to mommylabornurse.com and click on the Natural Series. All right, let's get right back into this week's episode. Did they have to take you? Do you remember like what degree tear that you had? Did you have a second, third, or fourth?
I think I was the one before you tear like all the way.
So you're probably third.
Yes.
Third degree.
I was a third.
Yeah.
So that was with Rhett, and that recovery, like postpartum recovery, was so hard. I think it was because it was my first baby, my body, like I had gained that extra weight. Just everything shuffling around because I went from like my wedding weight straight to like gaining 60 plus pounds. Yeah. And then not only that, I tore like crazy. It was not a traumatic delivery, but it was just the recovery that was hard. So then Vance's recovery was just a breeze, even though he was slightly bigger than Rhett was. So that was his.
And how far apart are they?
Oh, I know. And this is a whole nother thing.
Okay.
They're 22 months apart.
Okay.
So I should add, I guess. And I think 1 year after we had Rhett, Ryan and I were kind of like, we'll try, but not try. We never really had a conversation, but I think we were so excited about having our first. And so I just became pregnant with Vance. I kind of had a hunch that I might be, and took a test, but I was breastfeeding still while I got pregnant. I was, at like the year mark after having had my son. Mm-hmm. And I have theories on this. Once again, I never like to give bad information, but I had pretty bad postpartum depression after my second son. And I mean, I don't know why. I have, theories about why. I think one of my theories, and this could be completely wrong, is that they were closer together. And I think I never really gave my hormones a chance to normalize. Like that's one of my theories, that because just hormonally after my second son was born, my hormones were like all over the place. And I knew that something was off with them.
How soon did you know that something was off?
So mine didn't start until 6 months. It was like 6 months on the dot. And it just kind of like Well, it started physically, and that's why I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was like a hormone thing where I got these crazy tension headaches to the point where I had to go to the ER because I didn't know what was happening to me, and they had to do like an MRI.
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of like dizzy. Yeah. And just, so that's why I'm like, and then after that, it was like anxiety, just like depression, where it would kind of come in waves, where it was just, mentally, I was like not okay. Physically, I wasn't okay. So that's why I'm like, I think it was like just a intense hormonal,
It could
you
be,
know, or it could have been stress from having 2 kids under 2, you know. There's so many different.
There's a lot that goes into it. Did you have to go on medication or anything?
So I didn't, but I had a psychiatrist or psychologist at the time that I had connected with. I started seeing a postpartum like therapist specialist.
Oh, good.
So I met with her a few times, and I think I saw like a holistic doctor. Actually saw several holistic doctors over the course of that, because with my second pregnancy, I only gained 30 pounds, but I like could not lose it. Whereas with my first, I gained like over 60, but I lost it without doing much. So that's why I think hormonally there was something, you know, or who knows, maybe my baby needed it for, but anyway, over the course of that postpartum journey, I met with tons of different doctors, but I didn't go on medication because I did start to come out of it. I think for me, it was like 2 months of postpartum that I started to kind of come out of it.
Good.
So
then now going into your third, how far apart were they?
So then 2.5 years.
Okay.
And I stopped breastfeeding Vance a little bit. I think with Rhett, I went like 15 months. With Vance, I went, I think around like 9 months, because my hormones were just so crazy out of whack. I was like, you know what? I need to do this for me. Like, I need a break.
That's what I did with my second. I was like done at, 8 or 9 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Just my body was kind of like, and I was just like, I need to get to feeling like me again. And at that point, we kind of thought we might have another. And so I was like, I need to like get back on track before we can even like go down that road. So it was about 9 months. And then it took me about, 2.5 years to where I was like, or the 2.5 year gap. So I forget how old Vance was, maybe 18 months when we were kind of like, okay. And then with Bowden, me neither. I'm like, how many? 20. I don't know. But then let's see. Okay, then we were ready to go for baby number 3. And at that point, it was not like, oh, let's kind of like try, because it had been 2.5, or they'd be 2.5 years apart. I think at that point it was like a little bit less, and I was like, I want to have a plan, like start trying. And it took us, I think, 4 months. I did have a chemical pregnancy, and that kind of like shook me a little bit, because we were trying, but I was still felt fortunate. It was only 4 months or so, and then that next month I was like not in the mindset to like try. And that, of course, that was the month we got pregnant. So it was like the month after the chemical pregnancy. And then, his pregnancy, Bowden's pregnancy, was super, like, I was super active and fit. And, which brings me to his delivery. I was 39 weeks and 5 days. And our family had just gotten into town. We went out to dinner, and then I got home that night, got ready for bed, and then my contractions started around like 9 p.m. and they started coming like regularly. I think I labored at home until like midnight or so, and then showed up at the hospital. I can't even remember like how dilated I was once I got there. It wasn't like significant. But it was midnight. There was like not a lot of people there, but we were super excited, obviously. And I think this was one situation where I just like didn't connect with the nurse as well as I would have hoped. And I feel like I'm I'm just such a connection person. I'm very like, I get, it's kind of like your not one, because I've done it 4 times, but like, you only get it like so many times in your life. It's like
you really do. I mean, it's a very special moment, unique moment in your life, no matter if you have one child or you have 8 of them. I mean,
totally.
it's unique. Yeah.
It's kind of like if you, I don't know. I mean, exactly. Like on your wedding day, if like
right.
the guy or gal who's marrying you kind of like says a bad joke, you're kind of like, why? Like, this is my one moment. Like, just
or like, you got shrimp you ordered shrimp instead of chicken or something.
Totally.
Or something.
Yeah. You're just like, come on. Like, this is like the time where you make, and it wasn't like it was just not special. Whereas I think I got so lucky with such lovely nurses and situations that like my first time was great. The second time was amazing. And then the third, I was just like, oh, like, so I try to keep I'm like an energy person. I was like, okay, I gotta like stay positive, whatever. And I labored until I had to get the epidural, which I think at that point was probably around the same time, like 5 or 6 centimeters, if I'm recalling it appropriately. And then like, she was kind of MIA. Like she didn't really come in and check me. I feel like, this is coming from someone who had like the 10-hour labor. And then I had like the 4-hour labor.
Yeah.
And so with my third, and they also told me he was smaller, which I'm used to having these 9-pound babies. So I was like, this one has got to go by, and it's not always indicative of that. Like your body could, who knows? But in my mind, I was like, this one's going to go by like snappy. She was kind of MIA, and I was group B strep for this one. It wasn't for my second. And so I don't know if that played into it, and I didn't call my doctor on the way there. I'm like, I don't know if that mattered, but what I wish I would have done is like called the on-call doctor so that they knew they had a patient, which after the fact, the nurse said that she had been in touch with the doctor, but they weren't, it was like a loss of communication. I feel like no one really told me that they had talked to the doctor. And then I was kind of like, well, what's going on? So didn't really check on me that often. It was more like I had to like ask, like, can she check me? Like, and I would wait because I'm like third kid, but at the same time, I'm like third kid, like this one could come faster. So I think it got to be until, let's see, I don't know. They kept saying that they had talked to the doctor, and they kept saying that at that point it was like morning. So this had started at like 9 p.m. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, where is my doctor? The nurse is kind of MIA. I feel like I'm ready to like, I don't know if I like felt an urge to push, but I was getting nervous, right? I was like, what's going on? But at the same time with an epidural, it's kind of hard to tell too.
It is, but sometimes that happens, or you start to shake or something when you're getting
Yeah. And I think I started to get super nervous, and they kept promising me that the doctor was going to be there, but then another like hour would go by, and I'm like, where's the doctor? And then they'd be like, well, I think at this point it was like 7 a.m. They had promised me that the doctor was going to be there at 7 a.m. At this point, I don't know how dilated I was. I think I was super close. And I was starting to get nervous because I was like, I feel like I'm ready to have this baby. And then they came in at like 7:45 after they said she'd be there at 7. And they said, well, another doctor is going to come, but she's stuck in traffic. She's going to be here now at like, And I was like, am I supposed to like wait to have this baby? So
I'm just gonna like hold him in. Okay, no problem.
So that's when my question about laboring down comes in, because it was like, am I laboring down? Or like, I was just getting so nervous at that point. Cause at this point I had been like waiting for probably a good 4 hours for someone to kind of come in and tell me like what the plan was. So then, thank goodness my husband was there, my dad was there, my mom was there, and my dad, I'm like daddy's little girl kind of. And so I was in tears when they came in, and I was just like, I'm so confused. Like, where is the doctor? Nobody's told me like who's coming in at this point. Now someone's stuck in traffic. Like, I'm kind of starting to panic. I just want a doctor in here. And I don't even know where the nurse was at that point. Like, I don't know why she wasn't in there. And I don't know why she hadn't told me where I was at and how long I could sit. You know what I mean? I was just like, like who's going to manage this situation right now?
Yeah.
So the head of hospital came in, or my dad had a good chat with her, and she was so nice. And she's just like, we have a doctor here who can come in right now if you feel like you're ready to go. He's, fully like, do you want us to do that? And I was like, I'm the kind of person, I'm like, I don't want to inconvenience anybody, but I was also like,
yes, baby. I mean,
yes. Literally, I was like, I don't want to be. And I was in tears because I hate being in those positions. I was just like, I shouldn't be having to decide this right now. Once again, I'm like, I don't know. So I was like, please, like, I would just like him to come in at least give me like a professional analysis. And sure enough, he like pulls out and he was like, we're having this baby right now. So essentially, like the baby was about like, I pushed not even like one time.
Yeah.
And
I could have probably told you that. I mean, come on, 4 hours of just like,
right.
Yeah.
It was so bizarre. And I did, recap it on my blog in the nicest way possible. But that one was a little bit disappointing. I think it was just, I didn't connect with the nurse. The doctor was MIA. Both doctors ended up coming in and like profusely apologizing, which at that point I just had my baby in my arms. And it was like, again, I'm a nice person, but it was kind of the last thing I wanted to hear because I was like, this was just kind of, I have my baby. I'm happy now. Like, I just, I want to move on, Yeah. So, anyway, he was born healthy and that's all that matters.
And they're smaller too.
He was 6 pounds.
Oh,
yes.
weird.
He was 6 pounds, 15 ounces.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why he came out so fast. He just slip slide, right?
Totally.
Like,
and
real quick.
And they told me that. And I was like, I don't birth small babies. Like my first was like 8-13. My second was 9 pounds, 3 ounces. And sure enough, the OB, way before I even went into labor, she's like, it's a smaller baby. So at that point I was like, I wonder if it's a girl, but all these generalizations. And no, he came out, he was a boy and he was 6 pounds, 15 ounces, basically fell out, which, but looking back, I think, you always want your labor experience to be just so positive. And I think, when you go, you just want it to flow, and when it doesn't, it can be, even though mine is probably on the scale of scary, like a 2, but I think anytime you're in that situation, it can be just when you feel like helpless,
Yeah. And especially when there's it sounds like there was just a huge breakdown of communication with your nurse. Like your nurse definitely should have stepped up and explained kind of the time. That's usually like the first thing that I kind of do with a patient is like say, okay, this is the timeline of what's going on right now.
Totally.
And, like I am going to check you right now, or I'm not going to check you right now, or the doctor's doing this, or like, hey, you just got an epidural, or you feel you kind of have to play that sort of game. And it sounds like she just kind of left you and you were just confused.
Yeah, where it almost felt like, oh, this is her third, or this is an assumption, but like, oh, this is her third. And so she's probably more relaxed. She can chill for a little bit, but I was more like, kind of like definitely panicking. So again, it could have been way worse, but for me, I don't want to say it was bad. It was a wonderful experience. It was like still a very lovely labor experience, like starting contractions at home, dilating consistently. All in all, it was, if I started him at 9 p.m., I had him at, I think like 8 a.m. or something around that. So, but yeah, looking back, I'm like, had I been in the care of somebody else who was a little bit more on it, like it just probably would have been a much more enjoyable experience, I think.
Totally.
So, but yeah, so with this fourth, that's given me perspective to like, I talked to my doctor about it and I was just like, cause she's testing me for group B strep this time. And, I had it with 1, had it with 3, didn't have it with 2. And so she was like, if you have it, even if you test negative, I still want you to get the antibiotics. And I'm all nervous from last time because I'm like, I don't want someone to force me to like sit in labor that's just this pending thought on my mind that I'm like, that was such a bad experience that I'm like, I don't want to have to,
That
but
does
I don't
strike
know.
me. That does strike me as a little bit odd, unless you did either of your babies have any issues afterwards with fevers or they had
No, I
GBS sepsis?
know.
Like if you had a history of a baby having issues, then I could totally
Yeah,
understand why your provider would say, okay, we're going to treat you even if you do come back negative. But
totally. So maybe I'll push back on that one.
I would just question it further of, just kind of say, is that really necessary? Can you kind of explain to me more why you're thinking that? And then there might be a reason that I'm not thinking of that's in your health history that I'm not aware of, that she's like, oh, it's because of this or this, that, and the other.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It was just one of those things. Yeah. Where like, kind of like you get spidey sense and you're like, well, why
always
do I have to do
using
that?
Your voice. Always
totally.
I just talked about it in my story today of like using your voice as a mom.
I think so
important.
Yeah.
I want to know, Brooke, with your fourth pregnancy now, I first want to know, like, what do you think you're having? If you think you're having a boy or a girl or what?
Yeah.
What do you think you're having?
Can you tell? Or is there like,
let me see.
I know.
I'd have to see your other belly.
Right. That's what people say. But so I know. And it's funny because like with Bowden, I carried smaller because he was so small. Yeah. And then with Vance, I carried big and round.
Yeah.
Because he was just a tank. And so this time I feel like I'm carrying maybe a little bit more similarly to Bowden, but I've gained 10 pounds more than I have with both Vance and Bowden, which I'm like, man, but that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's another boy just because I feel like still don't even know. I know how babies get made, but I'm like, I don't know how like the sperm, I don't know how it determines the sex of the baby anymore.
I think you're more, and don't quote me because I'm not an expert on this either, but I think you are more like the more of the same sex that you have, the more likely
it's like more likely
going to have the same sex. But there's still a chance, obviously.
That makes the most sense because I'm like, if it has to do with, I'm getting like TMI, but like the speed of the sperm or whatever, I'm like, wouldn't that mean that like, that's the kind that my husband makes? Like, I don't know. Like, but then people are like, it has to do with like your, and I love having a platform, but then I also get all these kind of like funny comments about like why I'm going to have what I'm going to have. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like assumptions.
Same.
Right.
I put a story, cause I also didn't find out genders with both of mine. So I know all the feelings and all the thoughts that you have in your head, but I remember saying one comment with my second one with Ryan, and I have two boys as well. But with Ryland, I talked about how my leg hair like stopped growing with him.
That happened to me too.
Okay. Yeah. So like
crazy.
It didn't happen with Walter. Like it was fine. And then it happened with him and everybody was like, you're having a girl. It's definitely
Isn't
a girl.
That
blah, blah, blah,
funny?
blah, blah, blah. And I had
happened to me with Bowden. And even this time I'm like, I literally don't have to shave.
Yeah. It's so great.
Ever. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because that happened to me. Certainly with Bowden, it's not as like crazy this time as it was with Bowden. With Bowden, I was like, literally, I shaved like, a week ago and it's not even where normally I have to shave, like every other, I feel like that's so
every other
funny.
day. I know I'm the same way, but during pregnancy, it just was like, nope, you're good. And I'm like,
and my hair. I was like, I had like thick hair, but I'm like, this is the best of every world because I got the hair, but then I don't have the leg hair and,
I know.
So yeah,
so who knows? It might be a girl. I don't know. We'll have to see. I know. What would you even do with a girl after having 3 boys?
See, that's what I say. And there's such a huge assumption that I want a girl that, and I talk about it on my page all the time because in some ways, I guess I can like spill the beans a little bit on here. Like a boy feels more comfortable for me because I have 3 at this point. And so to me, it's just like plug and chug. Like I know, and there's like, I would love either one. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, I want this or I want that, which more power to you. If like you have an opinion about what you want. For me, I'm kind of like, I just feel more comfortable. Like I can see the pros to both, but the thought of a girl is a little bit like scarier to me because after 2 boys, you're just like, we're girls, right? But I'm like, I don't know, something like feels foreign about that. And
no, I totally get it. We don't plan on having a third child, but if we did, like, I would totally take a boy. 3 boys sound great. Like, it's just you're just like, okay, I did it 2 times before. Now, like, let's third time's a charm,
totally.
like,
I'm kind of like, I could pump out like 6 boys, becoming a girl. Like, I don't know. Like, I might have other questions. I don't know. So we'll see.
Totally
but,
get it. Well, I'm excited for you. I know. I'm excited for you. So I have one last question with this pregnancy, with this birth. Do you plan on doing anything different?
Well, I'd be curious to know, and I've been following you long enough, but I still don't know. I'm curious, like what was and I don't know if it's personal for you, but like, what made you want to go like the unmedicated route? Like, why? I'm curious to hear that from you.
Yeah. So personally, the first time I wanted to do it because my mom had a C-section with me and she had a very long labor with me, pushed for a long time. She had an epidural. And so I have seen in my practice that the less interventions, really kind of the better odds you are of having a successful vaginal delivery and avoiding a C-section. So I knew I had that. My mom had that history of having a C-section with me after having a rough labor. And I've always before I had kids, I've been a labor and delivery nurse. I had been a labor and delivery nurse for a few years before having kids and taking care of different types of patients. And I just have always been very attracted to like moms who go natural and just very like fascinated by it.
Yeah,
why people do it, So I started reading birth stories. I started listening, to some of my coworkers talk about, going without epidurals. My mom actually, with my sister, she didn't have an epidural, and just hearing different points of view of like how the craziest thing with my first. I didn't experience this with my second. With my first, such a intense, cool feeling was going from being in so much pain. And then all of a sudden you're not in pain anymore. And like your baby's right there. So it's like this crazy shift.
Totally.
And you get like this crazy, crazy high. At least I did.
Interesting.
And that doesn't happen with every birth. It obviously, it didn't happen the second time around with Rylan for sure. It took me like a little bit to get that kind of
like
birth
get
high.
Your bearing.
Get that kind of birth high. But after my first one, I felt like so on top of the world. You just like feel so crazy good. So it was just a combination of kind of a lot of different things, of trying to avoid a C-section, just being interested in it and kind of just seeing if I could do it, because I had patients, before and had taken care of patients who had gone unmedicated. So I was just really curious and I wanted to see, I went into it with a very open mind and knowing my options and knowing that I could get an epidural, but I really, wanted to give it my best. And I was able to do it. And then with Rylan, I was really on the fence in the beginning during his pregnancy of like, I'm really curious what an epidural is like, but ultimately I was like, well, I've done it once before. I can probably do it again. It's probably going to be even faster, right. Not that Walter's, my first one, was a long by any means, but to me it felt long. But with my second
how long was it? I'm just curious for information gathering purposes.
Sure. So with his, I woke up at 7 a.m. And then I labored at home, irregular kind of contractions, 4 to 5-ish minutes apart, kind of all day until about 8 or 9 o'clock. And then I went into the hospital and I was at about 5-ish centimeters. So that 5-ish kind of mark of those kind of painful contractions. Okay. And then I ended up having him at 3 a.m. So it was another 6 hours. So it was like, that's a pretty normal, like, honestly, like very normal, almost shorter kind of labor. Absolutely. Once you get to that active point. And then with Ryland, what happened is I went faster. His whole thing, like Walter's the whole thing was 20, hours. Right. With Ryland, the whole thing was about 8 hours, but I stalled at the very end at like 9.5 centimeters.
Oh,
So I was like doing really well.
And
it
at
was
that
like,
point, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably like the hardest part, is
God.
it? I don't
know.
know.
It was very, very hard. So I was able to push through and it was fine. But I mean, there were points during that hour and a half or whatever that I stalled that I was just like, holy crap. Can I get an epidural?
So you're like, I'm down.
And I almost did. I mean, I almost did. If I could have sat still, because I'm the kind of person that I have to move. Like I can't sit still when I'm in pain. And I think if I had been able to sit still, I probably would have been like, you know what, guys?
Come back in. I'll take that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So at that point, then how long were you in that stage before you had him?
Before I had him. So I stalled at the very end. It was about an hour and a half where I was at like 9.5 centimeters. So that was rough.
Oh.
And that does, I mean, it happens, but it doesn't happen, all the time.
But
9.5 centimeters for about an hour and a half. And then once he turned, so both of my babies, I had really intense back pain because they were both turned the wrong way. They were OP.
Oh no.
So once he turned and I started kind of pushing at 9.5 centimeters. And once he turned, I pushed for like 15 minutes and he came right out. It was just, it was just because he was turned and he was a pound bigger. So Walter was 6 pounds. He was tiny. He was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. And then Ryland was 7 pounds, 3 ounces. So he was a little bit bigger, but I think it was just the matter of him being turned. But I have said, I just said it the other day on my story, like if there is ever a third baby, like I think I really want to invest in that epidural and see what that's
like. Interesting.
I don't, if I could control everything, if I could promise myself that I'm not going to stall, like totally I would do it again unmedicated because it's such an intense, crazy experience. But I can't.
There are those moments where it's like, is this worth?
I mean, you can't. And the other thing I tell people too is you can't guarantee an epidural that's going to work perfectly either. Like there are plenty of moms that I take care of, or moms that take my birth courses and they choose to get epidurals and then they end up being one-sided epidurals or they still have breakthrough pain. And they're like, I'm really glad I took your course and I knew what to do, like in case I had this pain because it wasn't a perfect epidural. Now with yours, it sounds like you had pretty good, but all 3 times you had pretty good coverage.
I did. And I was just talking to my friend about that because she was like, I don't think it even worked with my second, whereas hers worked with her first. And I'm like, mine worked all 3 times. It was just a matter of like the dosage difference. And it was just slightly like stronger sometimes, like where I almost I liked and preferred a little bit lighter because once I forget who it was with, it's all like jumbled together, but I couldn't even like move my legs, like even the feeling dead. And and I like to be able to kind of move my legs. Like I know I can't get up and walk, but I feel like you should kind of be able to move them, right? So, like where one would be like dead and and it took a while to kind of like wake up and I still have, it's probably from the delivery, but like some nerve things, not bad, but when I shave over it, I'm like, oh, that's the leg that was dead. I wonder, who knows? But, I've thought about, dare I say, like doing, do you call it an unmedicated birth? I don't want to like offend anybody. What do you guys call it?
So I kind of interchange a lot of different words. And I actually, in the natural series, I have like a disclaimer, like a special section that says like, hey, I call this the natural series and I use the word natural, but like not like in any way, shape, or form,
that you're unnatural or whatever.
A dig against moms who have C-sections or anything like that.
It's just the term. Absolutely.
It's hard for me even sometimes to say unmedicated because I didn't go unmedicated. I got IV pain medicine through my IV. I didn't get an epidural, but I got IV pain medicine. So I feel like my birth wasn't unmedicated.
Totally
I did get
unmedicated.
IV pain medication. I did utilize nitrous oxide. And I mean, that's another form, you know?
Okay. I have a question on that. Can
Yeah.
you just like ask for it like as you need it?
It
Or is there
depends.
like, I assume there's probably like, you can't have it the whole time because I would be like, oh my gosh, put this thing on my face.
Yeah. So with nitrous oxide here in the States, not all hospitals are to have it available.
Okay.
It's a little bit more popular overseas.
Okay.
My hospital like literally had just gotten it when I was in labor with my first one. So that's why I wanted to try it. I was not a fan of it, but it's kind of,
is that like laughing gas?
It's similar to laughing
okay.
gas. Yeah. It's a little bit different, ratio, like the nitrous and the oxygen. But it's very similar. What I tell moms is, don't expect it to take away of any of your pain. Okay. It's not meant to do that. It's more of just, it's more meant to just like, to just make you not care about
chill you.
Much. Right.
Interesting.
So so if you know it about that, then you usually it's like you can utilize it a little bit better. You're not expecting it to really take away your pain. But if moms go into it and thinking that like, oh, this is like, if I breathe into this is going to take my pain away, then their expectations are not met. Right.
Totally.
So nitrous oxide is one of the ones, if you have it available, you can ask for it. But here's the disclaimer with COVID. Unfortunately, they've taken nitrous oxide away because it aerosolizes COVID really well, I guess.
Okay.
So our hospital hasn't had it in place ever since COVID started.
Interesting.
And I don't know that a lot of hospitals are. So
would that change your decision if you knew you didn't have access to that to go unmedicated?
Me personally, no, because I didn't use it with Rylands at all.
Got you. That's right.
I didn't like it with Walter, so I was like, I don't
care
about it.
Got it.
I think
if you didn't like rely on it, you kind of just wanted to see how it went.
Yeah.
And mentally it didn't like, I guess, because when your baby's here, it's like, you don't want to be, what I think I like about the epidural, and I don't know anything else, but it doesn't seem to like affect my brain. Right. So when my baby's here, and maybe slightly because you're going through intense pain and you're like not feeling any of it. So that can be a little bit of a trip, but like, all in all, I like feeling like present when, the baby is there. And so I don't know, it's worked so well for me that I feel like and I'm glad that you said that with the intervention, especially coming from like a labor and delivery nurse, that like, because you hear rumors that like, oh, it doesn't matter like when you get it, right? That epidural. Whereas I've always had this theory, I don't know, it just makes sense where I just like to go kind of as long as I can, which I know I can go the whole way if I like decide. But for me, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go take it as far as I can and then bring in the big guns. And then I can kind of like relax and like sit there and kind of wait. Whereas if I didn't do that, I'm like, God, it would just depend. Right. And the thing I think that's hard about it is you don't know how it's going to go.
Right.
So it's like you said, you could stall at 9.5 and I'm like, I could barely get through like 5 centimeters. So like,
it's rough.
I can't even imagine having bypassed the opportunity to get it. I mean, can we do it? Yes. Right. It's like, we're made to do this. But I think, I don't know. I have, there are people who on their 3rd and 4th are like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to try. I don't know. I think I would have to read through your,
Here's what we're going to do, Brooke. I'll give you access to my natural course. You can go through it. Okay. If you're into it, you go for it. I have a lot of people who take the natural course and they're like, like gung ho.
I need a refresher.
And then they take it. Okay. Perfect. So you'll go through it. And if you want to incorporate that, then fine. If not, I talk about epidurals in that course as well and what to expect. You obviously had epidurals before, so you'd be fine. But I think that would probably like ease your mind a little bit too.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, this is what I need to know. Yeah. This is what I need to know just in case I want to go a little bit more natural, but
and to be honest, like I'd love to go, which is so silly because we all have like these wants and desires for our births, but like I'd love to go a little bit farther this time. Like I'm not I will get an epidural and I will, I'll stand by it. But there is something about, like going, I do love, it's so weird, but I love to feel, not love, but like, I just want to feel that pain. You know what I mean? Like I want to know
it's not
that.
Weird. A lot of people say that. A
right?
lot of people say that. Yeah. It's like you feel very grounded almost in a weird sense. Yeah.
You're like, I feel very connected to this process. Yeah. Whereas when you get the epidural, there is a sense of like, I don't know what my body is doing. Like even when I'm talking about Bowden's experience, my last birth, I'm glad I got the epidural. I wouldn't have changed it. But like, had I not, that whole experience would have been entirely different because she probably would have been in there, like checking me. I mean, I would have had to have somebody in there probably like regularly with me, I assume. Okay, wait. And then I have one more question. Did you have a doula or you are just a pro?
No, I had to. So this is what I did with my first one. I had one of my friends come in, who is another coworker. She just came in and she acted as my doula because she is a labor and delivery nurse. She can act as a doula. So she came in and was my support person doula. And then next time around, I kind of did the same thing that I had, but she was already at work. I didn't have to call her to like come in. She was just already there. So I had my nurse and my labor and delivery nurse, and then, another coworker of mine. But really the biggest difference between my first one and my second one is my husband was like scared out of his mind the first time and just not he was there and a support person, but he was just like, what the heck is going on? Yeah, totally. So the second time around, I really prepped him. I made him take at least parts of my course that I recommend. So I know my husband would be like, what? Yeah. We talked about it beforehand. I told him like, okay, this is what I need from you to be supportive. I was like, I don't need you to do any of like the hands-on kind of stuff. I just need you to, encourage me.
A verbal coach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he did phenomenal and he latched on to that perfectly. And it was great. Yeah. He did super great. So that's kind of what I did. I know that, in my course, I say doulas are awesome. I 100% recommend doulas if you can afford them.
Sure.
They're, it is an expense, but don't go into debt just to hire a doula. Like your labor and delivery should be able to provide you support, but it just kind of enhances everything. That's how I feel.
Absolutely. My mom and I were talking about it and she got epidurals with both my sister and I, but she's like, they said with her, and I know that it can be like genetic based on how your mom birthed and stuff. They said if she would have not gotten it with, and again, don't know if this is true, but if she would have not, her labors would have been like fast. And so she was like, if I had a doula, I maybe would have considered that because she's like, I couldn't have done it. And I don't think my dad was like well-versed in like how to do it. We don't have the resources, they're not going to like, so. And I think that would be cool. Like now that you're saying that, to have like my husband be more a part of like the experience, because for me personally, I couldn't do it like without his health. And he's like used to play professional soccer and he coaches all our boys teams. So I'm like, he would be so good at it. It could be a fun way to like,
to really connect.
Like to have him like be really part of, because I'm always like, you don't even know how contractions feel. Like, I wish he could, wish he like knew, right? Yeah. Just not to punish him.
You know what? You're going to love it. You're going to we'll get you in the course and we'll have you go through it. You can get a nice refresher. If you want to go for it and go natural, then like, awesome. Yeah. If not, then you got the, educational, the education that you need beforehand just to get a refresher. So
absolutely. That'd be great. That's perfect. Well, we'll see. I'll keep you posted, but I'd love to look at it.
When are you due?
So I'm due September 14th.
September 14th. Okay, cool. Yeah. So this episode will probably come out, I'll have to look a little bit after that, but we will definitely get an update from you after you have your baby, because I want to have you back on to hear all of that.
My gosh. Yeah. Right? Knock on wood. I'm like, this one better be the easiest out of all of them. But anyway.
All right, Brooke. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was so fun just to chat about you and your births and this little fourth baby who's a surprise who we don't know.
I know. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it big time. This was fun.
All right, guys, that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and letting me be a part of your motherhood journey. It is truly an honor. If you like what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And I love hearing what you guys think of the podcast. So if you're liking what you hear or you have a suggestion, I'd be so grateful if you'd go ahead and leave me a review wherever you're listening to help more mamas just like you find the show. What do you think? Are you starting to feel a little more confident about your pregnancy and birth? Well, if you want more, be sure to head on over to mommylabornurse.com/podcast for today's show notes and a library of episodes so you can keep getting educated before your upcoming birth. And while you're over there, be sure to check out the blog and learn about our online birth classes. Find it all and more over at mommylabornurse.com/podcast. See you next week, same time, same place.